I am Christopher John Bjerknes. I'm the author of many books on Christianity and Judaism. I have been heavily researching Zionism for over 30 years, and I have kind of a unique perspective on why the Middle East plays such a predominant role in world affairs. And the primary reason is because the land of the Canaanites, the ancient Canaanites, was described as the land of milk and honey. And there was a nomadic tribe of Hebrews that wandered around and found itself in Egypt and marveled at the beauty and might and the holiness of Egypt and wanted to garner all of that for itself. So it wanted to take the holiness of the Egyptian gods, and it wanted to take their wealth and their beauty and their goodness and truth, and wanted all of that for itself in this land of milk and honey in Canaan. So it created a biblical mythology that they adopted the god Seth Typhon of Egypt, who the Egyptians had themselves abandoned. And this God chose them as its chosen people and made a contract with them called the covenant of Abraham. And that covenant stipulates that they must obey the commandments of this God, whom they called the Holy One, the God of Israel, Yahweh. And if they obeyed those harsh commandments, that they were chosen to be a people who would take over the empire of Ramses II, which is now Greater Israel, from the Nile to the Euphrates. And that was described to them as the land of milk and honey. Now, it's important to note that this nomadic people is not indigenous people of milk and honey. On the contrary, the commandments that the God of Israel gave to them were to exterminate the indigenous peoples of the region of the empire of Ramses II from the Nile to the Euphrates, and in particular to exterminate the 7 nations in and around the nation of Canaan, to utterly blot them out, to leave nothing standing from them, to kill all the animals, destroy, completely annihilate everything about them and blot them out of the memory of the world. And this became embraced in this overarching mythology that the Amalekites of the land of milk and honey have to be completely annihilated and exterminated, and the wandering nomadic Hebrews can then take over this land, and in this land they can build a temple for their god Seth Typhon, and this temple becomes the house of their god. Now their god is a wrathful god, so when they move into this land which is given to them, because their God is supposedly the creator God and holds deed and title to every region of its creation, and it supposedly took away deed and title from the indigenous people and gave it over to the Hebrews, who were not, by their own accounts, the indigenous people of this region, that God demanded obedience. And when they built this house, this special house for their God, the first temple of Solomon, Solomon constructed it with demons and angels, and he took on foreign wives and built houses of worship for those foreign wives who led the Israelites astray to worship foreign gods, the gods of the Canaanites, Baal, and 70 related gods, and they made sacrifices to Baal and Moloch and the gods of the Canaanites, and Seth Typhon very angry. So he allowed Nebuchadnezzar to destroy his house. And he, as he pledged to, scattered them and into exile in Babylon. And then the Persians, Cyrus came along and help to restore them to this land in which they were not and never were the indigenous people. So they then eventually, because Cyrus helped them out, built a second temple. And once again, they started to disobey this wrathful, angry God. So once again, they broke their end of the contract, broke their end of the covenant. So they got exiled by Tiberius Julius Alexander, who was of the Jewish family of Philo, and by the Romans and Titus. And part of this process of returning and then being exiled is the destruction of the temple, the house of their gods, because those gods then have to follow the Israelites to the ends of the earth so that the Israelites can continue to take over the holiness, the beauty, and the might, the Kedusha, the Tiferes and Ois of every nation on earth, and garner that all for themselves in their exile, just as they had done to the Egyptians. And part of this mythology is that their god, Seth Typhon, tricks all the other people into loving the Israelites and loaning them everything that they have. And then the Israelites then conduct an exodus and move on to other nations and take with them all the holiness, the power of the gods of those peoples, indigenous gods, and takes with them their wealth, their beauty, their goodness, and their truth, and robs them of all their holiness, beauty, and might, their Kedusha, Tiferes, and Ois. And this was a process that was set forth in the book of Deuteronomy, chapters 28 to 33. And this process of being nomadic, of being in the exile, then returning, then building the temple, then becoming disobedient, and once again having their nation and temple destroyed and being sent into exile, is a model that they have rigorously pursued and followed time after time. And this happened at the beginning of the Christian era when Titus and Tiberius Julius Alexander deliberately fulfilled the prophecies of Deuteronomy, destroyed the second temple, and sent the Jewish people into exile. Now, this is broken down into 3 periods of 2,000 years corresponding to the ages of the zodiac. These add up to 6,000 years. The 6,000 years are the 6 days of creation, from the creation of Adam until the final Messiah, son of David, is to restore the Jewish people once again out of the exile back into the land where they are commanded to exterminate the indigenous people and to build a temple and to anoint their king, Messiah, son of David. And this was to take place in a 2,000-year period. During this 2,000-year period of the Christian era, they were to be persecuted by the satanic forces of Christianity, which serves the satanic roles of the tempter of sin, the accuser of sin, the prosecutor of sin, and the punisher of sin. But they can sweeten those punishments by utilizing Christians as their scapegoat and passing all of their sins off onto the Christians. And the devil, Samael, enables them to do that. They are given the scapegoat, Jesus Christ. The devil is the accuser in the heavenly court, accuses them of their sins, but betrays the Gentiles, who are supposedly his children, in exchange for that scapegoat, Jesus Christ, and instead falsely accuses all of the Gentiles of the sins of the Israelites. So during that 2,000-year period of Gentiles worshiping Jesus Christ, the scapegoat, the Jewish people obtain their redemption for disobeying Seth Typhon. And through that process of redemption, of both the punishments inflicted upon them by Christians and by scapegoating the Christians for their own sins to sweeten those punishments, to sweeten the dinim, they believe they eventually obtain redemption and atonement. This process of offering up the scapegoat takes place on the Day of Atonement, Yom Kippur, and whenever they sacrifice goats to Satan to scapegoat the Gentiles for their sins.